running this as a webinar. So, so if you want to ask questions or speak, just raise your hand or say that you have a comment to make in the comments. So thank you all for attending, and we really appreciate your feedback on the work that we're doing. So let me go ahead and get started. I'm Linda Drake. I'm the Director of Career and College Readiness Initiatives for the State Board of Education. And we usually start with a land acknowledgement. We are connecting from the ancestral and unceded traditional lands of 29 federally recognized tribes and numerous other Native American tribes that have not received federal recognition. We give thanks to the Native American tribes who are the original and current stewards of this land and to the land itself. We acknowledge that peoples native to this land have not been well served by our educational system. We ask that you join us in our commitment to recognizing the important history of Native peoples in our state and in honoring Washington's tribes as one step towards dismantling the colonialism present in our education system. And then if you'd like to, please put your name and location, and if appropriate, your organization. And if you'd like, you could recognize the tribe or peoples that were the original inhabitants of your area. And thank you and welcome all. So in chat, your name and location and appropriate your organization. And in a minute here, we'll start a Zoom poll so we can learn who is on the line. All right, well, thank you. And let's see, it looks like we have mostly district level educators and school level educators. Thank you all for coming. So we wanted to get your feedback on work that the State Board of Education is doing, aligning the state profile of the graduate with current graduation requirements. The legislature authorized the state board to make recommendations on how to align current graduation requirements with the profile of the graduate. And this is in conjunction with and in addition to the ongoing work that we have studying graduation pathway options and making recommendations to the legislature about graduation pathway options. So a little bit of the background on this work. We started in January reviewing the profile of the graduate and current graduation requirements. We had a period of engaging with stakeholders in the spring. In July and through the present, the board has developed draft recommendations, and we've worked on refining them. And this is a second phase of engagement where we want to get feedback on the draft recommendations. And then in October through December, we'll finalize the recommendations and we'll be reporting those to the legislature in December. The engagement consisted of listening sessions, meetings with partner organizations and events. We have a survey. The survey is open right now. So we really appreciate your feedback in this listening session. If you want to be anonymous, the survey is probably the best way to share your thoughts. And if you don't feel like you've fully been able to share your thoughts and comments in this listening session, then the survey would be a good place to do that, to follow up. This is the Washington State Profile of the Graduate. It was created by the Mastery-Based Learning Work Group. And it shows sort of a high-level aspirational attributes and competencies that we want our Washington State graduates to have attained at some level before, by the time they graduate and leave our K-12 system. These are aspirational. I think that we are all working on these into adulthood, but we hope that these would be attributes that would prepare our students well for success in life after high school. So I'll quickly just, I'm going to go pretty quickly through these slides because I want to leave most of the time to hear from you all. So I think that probably most of the folks on the call are familiar with the current graduation requirements, but I did want to have these slides available as reference. So this is the 24 credit framework with its 17 core credits and 7 flexible credits. There are 3 parts of the high school diploma: the credit requirements, the graduation pathway options, and the high school and beyond plan. So again, this is the profile of the graduate. And in the alignment, and in the engagement that took place in the spring, we asked people for feedback on where they saw a misalignment between the profile of graduate and current graduation requirements. And these are the areas where we found the most lack of alignment. So it was financial literacy, showing cultural competency, cultivating physical and emotional well-being, and in applied learning. So as when we start to talk about the recommendations, you'll see that I organized the recommendations that the board has developed into these broad areas. Now, I did want to mention some ongoing work of the board that is in conjunction with this alignment work, and part of this alignment work. The board continues to work on building capacity for mastery-based learning. Also, the board is continuing to work on graduation pathway options. The legislature directed the board to study graduation pathway options and make recommendations as part of the work of the alignment and part of the work of looking at graduation pathway options. The board will be proposing draft legislation this coming legislative session to further clarify and define the purpose of graduation pathways and to add additional pathways, a performance-based pathway and a work-based pathway. So to collect your feedback in this listening session, we have a Padlet, and it is an online application that you can go to with this link. And also, if you're using a cell phone, you can just use the symbol as well. Once I'm going to stop sharing to show you what the Padlet looks like. Oh, let's see. I'll just leave that on for a second and make sure that you can all connect. So let us know in the comments if you are having trouble connecting. The way I have the Padlet organized is I have the recommendations under those broad areas of the profile area where we felt there was misalignment, and so the the recommendations address that misalignment. And in addition, we also have a column for the graduation pathway options. We found that practitioners in the field have a lot of comments about graduation pathway options. We will have a request legislation on that, but I wanted to allow feedback on graduation pathway options as well. So I hope you're all able to access the Padlet. Jaylee has put the link in comments as well. Thank you. And I'll stop sharing and show you the Padlet. All right, so this is what the Padlet looks like. You should be able to access it yourself now. You'll be able to rate our recommendations as well as add comments. So you can add comments under the recommendations, or you can press on the plus sign and create your own post if you have additional information, comments, concerns. So there's multiple ways you can help give us feedback by rating the recommendations that are here, and also by adding comments. All right, I'll return to the presentation and go over some of these recommendations. And you can enter things into Padlet at your own rate, and then we'll open up the conversation if you want to share things verbally. All right. So our main questions that we'd like you to fill in to address and on the Padlet is, what do you think of the recommendations? Do you have any concerns? And what would it take to make the recommendation successful? So the first recommendation is to support the work of the financial education public-private partnership in building capacity for districts to offer high-quality financial education to all students. The concern about financial education was one of the most commonly mentioned concerns among parents and students in our spring listening sessions. The next one is to address mental health and address the state policy for the waiver or excusal of physical education. So among students, mental health was a big concern that was mentioned often in our conversations with students in particular. This concern was expressed even before the pandemic started, but the pandemic made everything worse. And I think there was a concern for both mental health services and knowledge and learning about mental health. So one of our recommendations concerns creating more flexibility between physical education and health to allow for more room for mental health content to be taught. And then another concern that we heard from students and parents, as well as counselors, was sort of a lack of uniformity in the use of the waiver or excusal of physical education. So it could change, the use of the waiver could change from district to district, or even it could be different between schools in the same district. So we want to work towards more uniformity in applying that excusal. Next, we wanted to create draft recommendations to address embracing differences and diversity. The recommendations are to ensure that districts implement the since time immemorial curriculum, to partner with advocates to build coalition on the implementation of ethnic studies, to support English language learners in meeting graduation requirements, and increase opportunities for students to earn the seal of biliteracy. The supporting English language learners, I think that we've had a fair number of questions about that recommendation. It is specifically to allow English language learners to meet world language graduation requirements when they take an English language arts course. So for an English learner, English would represent a world language. Now, I think the best way for those for the learning of those students to be recognized is through earning the seal of biliteracy, but this would be in addition to pursuing the seal of biliteracy, we could also support these English language learners by giving them credit towards meeting their graduation requirements. Additional recommendations, including these address personal growth and knowledge. And the first is focusing on learning standards rather than seat time. This supports mastery-based learning and interdisciplinary learning. Improving the high school transcript would work in conjunction with this to support better reporting of mastery-based learning, better reporting of multidisciplinary learning, and allow a record of more detail on how graduation requirements are met. And finally, improving the high school and beyond plan through state support for a limited number of online platforms that would improve uniformity and portability for students. The superintendent of public instruction is going to be pursuing a proposal to do this, and the board supports that work. All right, so that concludes my brief overview of our recommendations. So we are wondering if you have suggestions for topics for additional recommendations. Are there other aspects of the current graduation requirements that you would want changed? And is the board on the right track? So I think I will pause there. As I mentioned, there are other ways to engage and give us your feedback, but in particular, the alignment survey. But please raise your hand or mention in comments if you'd like to give some comments, to share some of your thoughts. All right, it looks like Jim would like to speak. Jim, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me, Linda?
Yes.
I had a question on the first item, the financial literacy, and it sounds like there's a lot of support for that. And I guess my question is that another credit or half credit, or is that still to be determined? And do you think that'll be part of the recommendations for new legislation to the legislature?
I think the board is reluctant to create more credit requirements. So it is looking for ways that financial education learning standards can be embedded in the current framework. So looking for ways that could be embedded in the existing courses, to include it in the high school and beyond plan, particularly if there is a high school and beyond plan advisory, to see if it could be embedded in, well, there are some existing financial education courses. So I think the idea is to keep it within the current framework and not have a separate graduation requirement.
Thank you.
let's see. I did want to mention that there is a current grant program by the Financial Education Public-Private Partnership, and they do they they are interested in the possibility of financial education being taught through mastery-based learning. So the grant project could support districts exploring that. So that's an interesting direction to go. Let's see, it looks like Jacob was hoping there might be information about linking the focus on mastery-based learning assessments to the development of standard aligned curricula that can be shared en masse. I understand that's a huge task, but curious if there's been some conversations. Thanks for all of this amazing work. And it looks like, let me see who's on here. I'm looking to see if some of my colleagues who know more about mastery-based learning than I do are on the line. Well, unfortunately, I don't see either Alyssa or Seema. Alyssa is my colleague working most closely. She's the director of the Mastery-Based Learning Collaborative, but she is about to leave for maternity leave. Seema is my colleague who is also knowledgeable about mastery-based learning, but it doesn't look like she's on the line. So I will make an attempt and then I can connect you with Seema later if you still have further information. There is a current mastery-based learning grant program going on now with districts that are piloting mastery-based learning as a whole school. As part of that work, we have professional, sort of nationally recognized professional development providers that are working with those grantees, and they are also working on development of not curricula per se, but ways of delivering mastery-based learning that can be shared so that it's a reproducible model. So that may be about the limit of my knowledge. I know that we are working on tools that can be used by anyone statewide. We are working on information and tools that would help make mastery-based learning more easily accessible by districts and schools and classes and individual teachers. So I can connect you with that, that if you have more questions about it. Any other comments or questions that folks have? Let's see. Anyone want to share anything that they have put into the Padlet? We do have some good comments in the Padlet. We are We really appreciate it. You see if there are questions in the Padlet that should be answered. Okay, it looks like Kathy has a question or a comment. Go ahead, Kathy.
Thank you. I work at a alternative school. We have I think we're about 350 students in total. And majority of our classes are through an online program. And we're having a difficult time finding graduation pathways unless they're leaving us and going to the local homeschool. I'd love to see a way that if these are CTE certified instructors that are working online, could they not qualify for graduation pathways for our student?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is something that we probably should be in conversation with OSPI CTE about. I'd be curious to see what they are working on. It does make sense that if they are, I mean, I think that there are barriers to offering CTE pathways remotely and online because of the program requirements of CTE, and the CTE certificated teacher is only one of the program requirements. You know, there are other requirements such as, you know, advisory and things like that that could be barriers, but I'm sure that OSPI is concerned about those barriers, and we are too. I think that it is important that students be able to access CTE pathways. I know the board is interested in looking at, you know, ways that neighboring districts could collaborate to provide, you know, access for students. Maybe there's a role for ESDs. I think all of those things are worth looking into. The way we're trying to address it is just by these additional pathways, because there are some work pathways that wouldn't necessarily be CTE, but we think it makes sense that there are some work pathways that haven't officially aligned with the CTE program requirements that would still be good pathways.
Right. Great. Hey, thank you.
Yeah. Jim, I think you're a knowledgeable person about CTE, aren't you? Do you have any comments on that? Do you know where we might be with providing opportunities for CTE pathways?
Well, I think Stephanie said, don't be shy because it's a small group. So I had one comment before I answered that one. I had a comment on the, it was the second box on the tablet that said, I think it was the one that talks about the staff. Yeah. It's worded kind of strange. Schools continue to be understaffed to make all the new initiatives possible. And that wording is a little bit, to me, hard. You can look at that different ways, but I think what it means is that all these initiatives, it's going to be challenging because of the understaffing of schools. And I think the state board is aware, but the teacher and educator shortage, parapros, teachers, all the support people supporting schools, it's dire in some areas of our state. So I think the board just has to keep that in mind, excuse me, as we add more to requirements. But to get back to your question about CTE, it's a real challenge, especially for small rural districts. But I liked your comment that if we can pursue say if a student's pursuing the work-based pathway option, and I like the fact that it may not have to be CTE, because finding folks that are certified in the CTE can be a real challenge. My previous district had 5 or 6 teachers that were emergency or provisionally CTE certified, and OSPI has indicated that they don't want that to be permanent. But yet, if you're teaching 1 or 2 classes that are CTE, do you have to go back to school and get that endorsement? So, but I like the work-based pathways. I know there was a comment about, maybe that it doesn't provide foundational skills, but I would argue back, often kids learn quite a bit in a work-based experience that they don't necessarily learn in a classroom setting. And if they have support from the home high school, I think that can be a very enriching experience that can help keep some kids in school. I don't know if that answers your question or not. I hope it helps.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One of the proposals of the superintendent of public instruction, one of his initiatives, is to allow for credit to be earned through work experiences. And so I think the state board supports that. Our work pathway would be sort of a different thing. It would be, we feel as though the earning credit is one thing. Qualifying for a pathway would be another. We see our work-based pathway as needing a little bit more structure, some insurance of sort of additional demonstration of learning for the pathway. So the current proposal that the state board is putting forth requires that at least 2 different subject area learning standards, core subject areas, are addressed in the pathway. So if it were, say, a work experience, it could involve a presentation in addition or a reflection that would address some communication learning standards, as well as some other learning standards such as math or social studies to qualify as a pathway. Let's see. I wonder if my colleague, Jay Lee, wouldn't mind talking a little bit about the proposal. If Jay Lee is on. If not, maybe I could tap my executive director, Randy, to say a little bit about our work pathway. Jay Lee is there, thanks.
Yes, specifically the work one, or would you like me to refer to the other one as well?
I think the other one, the proposal as a whole.
Okay, yes. So for the board at last week's retreat, the board approved moving forward with submitting a legislative request. That is a bill proposal that would add these 2 graduation pathway options. So a performance-based pathway option and a work-related pathway option. So for the performance-based one, this would allow students to complete a performance-based learning experience where they apply knowledge and skills in a real-world context, providing evidence of applying state learning standards in at least 2 core mandatory subject areas that most directly align with their education or career goals as stated in their high school and beyond plan. And so this could potentially go beyond the ELA and math and could include a combination of 2 core subject areas that best align with the student's goals. And this could take a variety of different forms. So this could be a project, a practicum, a cultural activity, and could result in a variety of products that could be evaluated, like a performance, presentation, portfolio, report, film, or exhibit. Those are just some examples. But in order for it to meet the pathway requirement, it would have to meet state requirements that would be set in rules. So through the state board's rulemaking process, which would outline the framework of state level requirements around the new pathway. And that would include rules around the safety and quality of the learning experience, as well as the assessment criteria for determining the student has applied the learning standards. So what are we looking for in terms of evaluating the student's performance. And the evaluation must include at least one certificated teacher who's endorsed in the relevant subject areas or other applicable qualifications permitted by the Professional Educator Standards Board. And the school district would adopt a local policy explaining how they're meeting those state level requirements before providing the pathway. So that's the framework around the proposed performance-based pathway. And then in addition, the board is proposing a work-related pathway, which has a similar framework to it, but this would allow a student to complete a work-related learning experience where they apply state learning standards, again, in at least 2 mandatory core subject areas that most directly align with their goals. So what we mean there is that the student would be reflecting on what they are learning through their work experience and tying that back to learning standards in 2 subject areas that best align with their goals for after high school. And this could include paid or unpaid work experience, community service, internship, apprenticeship, pre-apprenticeship, for example. And it would have to meet the same framework of requirements as for the performance-based pathway in terms of the safety and quality of the learning experience and the assessment criteria for determining the student has applied the learning standards. And likewise, the school district would have to adopt their local policy before providing that pathway. So those are the 2 proposed pathway options. And so the board has submitted this request legislation to the governor's office for their review. So that's the stage where we're at right now in this process, waiting to hear back from the governor's office on that request. And then if approved, this could potentially be introduced as a bill for the upcoming session, and then, you know, work its way through the legislative process.
Thank you, Jaylee. Does anyone have any questions about that proposal? All right, any other questions, comments? Well, I really appreciate you giving us feedback. We, you know, if you wish to engage further, there is the survey, and you're always welcome to contact me if you have further comments. Appreciate the information that you've given us on the Padlet, and I think we can probably give you back some time in your day. So have a great rest of your day. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.